Writing name's going to change, eh?
Uh, Good afternoon, or it's afternoon here at NACTV. And for Coffee Chat on this date, we have our Member of Parliament, Dan Mazier, which we appreciate him taking time on. He's had a tour through part of the region, part of the electoral district today. And so we'll be asking him some questions. Looking forward to seeing what he's been doing for the summer and what is coming up for the fall session has started. But it's kind of nice to get it directly from the man's mouth instead of filtered through other means. So we appreciate you taking time to be here. I know you've had a busy day already. So my name is Christine Waddell, and I'm just really pleased. I hadn't seen Dan for a few months. So I tried to send you questions, but obviously technology failed me. Since July, you were interviewed in July.
Oh, was that the last time I was here?
Yeah,
okay.
it was sometime in July.
Yeah.
What have you been up to since July?
So we did have I guess we rose, I think it was June 22nd.
Okay.
I went actually that week after it, we actually got out to out west, had to attend a friend's wedding, their son's wedding. But then we're coming back, we got to the Calgary Stampede actually. So that was all the kind of just a vacation, but to kick back and see some of that. But ironically, I never even got to the Stampede grounds. There was just so many things going on around in Calgary that lots of colleagues met with and saw that, but it's a true experience. So then came back home, we did some passport clinics. I think we did 3 passport clinics this year, and I think about 8 or 10 barbecues.
Okay.
So right through the whole riding, 2 different. This year when we did our barbecues, we did like for the whole week, and then we like for 4 days, and then returned back, and then we did a week in July and a week in August. So
okay, when you're talking about the passport clinics, have you shared that with our general viewers in the past, what you do at a passport clinic?
Yeah, well, we started this, I guess this is our 2nd year doing them.
Okay.
Of course, first elected 2019 and then COVID, right?
Okay,
so
we were just discussing that and couldn't remember for sure.
In the riding, there's really, I think, only 3 Service Canada buildings, and 1 is open most of the time in Dauphin, part of the time in Swan River, and of course in Neepawa here part-time, and Russell part-time.
Okay.
So that creates a problem in itself, right? So you can go to a Service Canada outlet and they can look over your passport and application if they want, but they won't fix it for you. They won't do a lot of different things, and they don't have a camera. So what we provide is basically our office. There's different stations you go to. If you have a family, you'll make an appointment. What we had this year, you'll phone in your RSVP and say, look, I can attend at 2:00. I got 4 applications. I got 2 kids and parents, right? So then we allocate that appropriate time. You do as most as you can online, and we do have or online, or on the forms, have them filled out. It's supposed to be all in capitals. I'm telling everybody that now, so you remember for next year. It's supposed to be all in capitals, those applications. That trips up a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
But there's space to fill out and correct and all that stuff. We have a photographer there, so and that's really helpful for families, especially with little ones. He's really good. He travels with us as well. So $20 cash will get you your photograph done as well. And we put all the packages together and mail them off for you. And they come through our office, but you will get it mailed back to you just like in a normal process. So it's very helpful. We were in Shoal Lake, and we have a tendency to focus on where the offices are, right? Like there was two individuals. They're up there in year, like I don't know, 50s, maybe 60s. Never had a passport. And you said like they missed me last year, and they said, you know what? You came right to my community this year. He said I'd be absolutely a fool. Wife's trying to get me to go travel now. So thank you very much. So I had two guys come up to me after the after we did the clinics and thanked me for that. So it was that. He said, if you're going to come to that extent to actually make it this available, he says, why wouldn't I get it done? So
Yes.
And
So do you have a number that you can remember how many of those you've processed if you've had that many
200?
clinics?
More like about 400.
400.
400.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't think this household that I live in is going to be traveling anywhere outside of the country
Yeah.
anytime soon. But
You don't
having
know,
that,
eh? Yeah.
you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
It is. What's really impressive is like it's nice to see. It's a lot of the families come out, right? Or a lot of like people. I was very surprised how many people, especially Dauphin, Swan River, they go to Winnipeg to
Yeah.
go get their passports,
And
and it's like
I know
and
where
like,
you park for that. I've had that
so
experience.
I mean, like, it's, how many people like we live? We mail ours in. I can't honestly, unless there's a really expedited process, right? But yeah, if you can, you can. Like some people come, they have their photographs already and that, and they just want us to check over.
Yep.
There's, different first time or going from child to adult. A lot of that goes on. So you get the 18-year-olds or 16-year-olds all of a sudden coming in, right? They've changed. Of course, their passports need updating. So that is very helpful. Lots of families, instead of traveling to Winnipeg or traveling somewhere, they just go right to downtown wherever they are, and a lot closer for them, a lot more handier.
That's a tremendous service.
Yeah.
That I'm sure other members of Parliament must do that as well.
Well, Ontario so much. There's kind of two different philosophies. Some think that this is a Services Canada function, so why are you doing that as an MP? I am here to serve, and I think it's a especially in such a rural area where Service Canada isn't. I mean, why wouldn't we provide it?
Yes.
Like, so we got, actually all the staff comes out from Ottawa. We get a team here, all hands are on deck, and it's a good way for us to meet everybody that we represent, and we could potentially get phone calls from and stuff like that. So it's a real good team building exercise as well for 3 days or 4 days that we put them on. So
I think that something that people from other areas might not realize, like from a city or whatever, how approachable our elected members are at every level.
Yeah.
Every level. And that goes all the way from municipal right through to the members of Parliament.
Yeah.
It's not difficult to approach and be in touch with an elected official.
At least me, anyways. I can't.
Well, no, some people have had a lot of experience with different venues, and yes, I personally can tell you that most members of Parliament, no matter what their stripe, are very approachable.
Yeah.
And that is the whole point of representing people in your area.
Yeah.
So one of the things you do, I mean, in the summer, it's recess, you go from community to community, go on parades. How many parades did you do this year?
Actually, surprisingly, not that many. Actually, this is one of the few years we decided to do more on the barbecues. Like the weekends we were focusing on basically downtime, but on just enjoying our summers. I can't honestly. I don't know if we did 3, 4, but we didn't do the milk run. The milk run is usually the big one. There's 7 parades in that 1 week, right? So
I know what you're talking about, the milk run.
Yeah.
Can you explain to our viewers what the milk run is?
It starts in Oak River. It's along the Yellowhead Highway. It's Oak River, Strathclair, Hemiota, Harding, I believe. Did I miss one? There's 5 of them.
Is Oak Lake in there?
Oak Lake, but it's out of the riding. Oak Lake, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So, but the parade's not in Harding. It's just the end of the milk run. So they'll have a breakfast or something like that, right? But so it's every day. So there's horse competitions. It goes back to the old days. They called it the milk run because they could get back for the evening milking. They do their competitions and then they go back. There's everything from judging on canning, on preserves, to flowers, lots of 4-H crafts and things like that are like old fair stuff that we
Very
grew up with.
very
right?
much
Yeah, more traditional
more
type
traditional,
of fair.
which has been lost in
Yes,
those
yeah.
communities that are larger.
Yeah.
So-
So it's a lot of fun when you get out there, and then of course the parades are always it's a good way of just connecting with people. We didn't, like I said, we between all the stuff that was going on this summer, a lot more activity during the week. So that's why we thought, well, we'll just kind of lay low for the weekends
Yeah.
and get recharged. So
You do a lot of committee work. That's one of the
yeah, I'm the
main
vice chair on the environment committee, which
vice
is
chair on
a pretty hot
environment.
file.
I don't know if hot's the right word. Polluted. Anyway, yeah, that's good terminology. The climate and environment.
active file.
It's an active file. Any other committees that you sit on, like your vice?
Well, there's we'll
Chair.
get, because we're working on the files, like so for example, a lot of these the environmental, the different programs, like the Net Zero Accelerator Fund, for example, there was money misappropriation. There's an $8 billion fund to and it was for monies for the heaviest emitters in Canada for them to reduce emissions. Well, the Auditor General came along with Environment Commissioner came along with a report and said, well, here we got some issues here. They reported that over 70% of the projects that were under the Net Zero Accelerator that were supposed to reduce emissions gave no commitment to reduce emissions. So that's where it just starts. And so then we start digging in. So we go to Operations Committee and grill the different ministers on that. So we'll go to different committees to go try to figure out things on the environment file. So but mostly have been primarily focused on the studies on the environment file. And that's everything from emergency caribou study in Quebec, where the minister shut down a forest industry like equal to Swan River to save 9 caribou. To everything from Jasper, we're right now we're doing in committee, and what happened with the Jasper fires, and like leading up to that was all under Parks Canada management, forest management, and it's coming out now that it was totally mismanaged, and they knew that Jasper was at risk in 2017 and did nothing about it. So we're pursuing that, and then we're going to get back into that study next week, actually.
Okay. Now, do those committees meet during the summer?
They
Can.
if I'm going to sneeze. If they so you need as another party to sign on to that you want an emergency meeting,
Okay.
and then you can bring them back. We did that the week before Parliament sat on this caribou study.
Okay.
But that was we're with the online issue. We could do my part online, anyways. So that was good. But right now, I think I don't know if there's a committee sitting this week or not. Some emergency stuff, but yeah, you need a dance partner to get.
You have to
have the majority of the committee, I think, or at least one other ones to say, yeah, we want an emergency meeting.
Yeah. Well,
So
do you do those by Zoom?
we can. They're not as effective
I can.
because they got a
We
whole bunch of
understand that.
excuses, especially when you get. And we've seen this, right? There's a lot of ways to game the system, right? Oh, you don't have the right headphones, or we have a bad connection if they don't want to hear the testimony. So you're way better off just getting the witness in front of you, where it's interactions live and everybody's sitting in the chair. So
And body language will also
yeah,
be
yeah,
part of it.
yeah.
Be part of it.
Yeah.
The visual.
It is, when we're getting citizens versus, say, government officials, some of these people they live in remote areas of Canada, and the time they jet in and out, it is just as easy to get them a headset. You can do. We haven't done it yet, I don't think, in our offices, but you can actually give testimony if you have troubles with internet connections. Come to our office, and we can just hook you up with a headset and just go online and zoom in like that. So
Okay, so there is provision for that. And when the house has lifted for the summer, then it's not often that you have
no,
not often that you have
No.
meetings then. And it's the time to be out in your,
Yeah, that's considered. So one thing I guess we keep in mind, like my job is like two. There's two different pillars. And when I go to Ottawa, everything's about Ottawa. Everything's about legislation, passing laws, debating laws, like what the government says they're doing versus what they are actually doing. Passing budgets. That is what we do as MPs. That's our primary job in Ottawa. Everything's about the Ottawa schedule, committee work, all that stuff. Come out here, job is getting in touch with people, listening to what their priorities are, what the issues are. What do they think of the legislation that we're talking about? Is there something this is what's impacting you? Getting input from people that, what do you think of this law? Is it a good? Is it bad? And so that's my other part of my job. So I have to say it's a rewarding job. I take it more of I'm the servant, and it's pretty good. It's a good riding to represent, and people are very responsive if when asked. That's
okay.
for sure.
We'll get to it a little later. I know I've watched some of the stuff on CPAC, and I'm sure many of our viewers will check in with CPAC to see committee meetings or things.
There's another one, Parleview.ca.
Parleview?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can go into the committees actually, or into the House of Commons, and then you can stop the recording, rewind it. Like they're all recorded.
Okay.
So there's, it's like they're all there, and it's actually pretty good.
So
site.
if you miss what's been said,
yeah.
you can scroll back and
Question
hear.
period's really good to see that.
Question period is what keeps some people from being involved in politics, because it can get so combative.
It is, and it's too bad. Once people see it live, they have a totally different appreciation for it, right? Like the stage is set, basically. It is part of we call it the show. It is turned into a little bit of entertainment, but it's the gotcha moments. It's the, you guys are saying this. It's the rhetoric that I think people are getting really tired of. Liberals are getting found out. There's policies that are basically punishing, especially rural Canada, carbon tax, for example, and like they're misinforming, misleading Canadians outright, and Canadians are starting to see that now. So, people, when the governments get called out on that, they don't necessarily take too kindly to it.
I've got it's not a technical, it's a logistics with question period.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask the minister in charge of whatever a question and they rise to answer, they've been given that question ahead of time? No?
So the way it works is it used to be just whoever got recognized by the chair first.
Mm.
That was the good old days. And then it usually was the minister or whoever, right, and prominent members. As we've grown, so now the House leaders, like our House leaders, say, here's the list, like Conservatives get so many questions, like leaders round, like the leader goes first 6 questions. So they're 35-second questions and 35-second replies. And that's the way it works. It works for an hour. So there's about 42 questions, I believe, for that hour. And that's the way it works. So there's a schedule. We know when all the speaker knows is what's your list for who's going to stand up. He looks at you and makes sure you're set up, and you get to ask your questions. And that's what you'll see when he stands up when you run out of time. So that's at the beginning of every question period. There's member statements, and every once in a while you'll see like there's 60-second statements from the member, and I use them. You can use them for recognizing someone special, a special achievement in the riding, or you can make it a political statement or two. It's sometimes it's a little bit of both, but those are called member statements, and they happen for 15 minutes at starting at 2:00 every day.
So
just before question period.
Oh, just before question
Yeah.
period, which
Yeah.
to others might not realize. It's just called QP.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
don't. They
I
skip.
don't know why they call it question. Well, I guess we ask the questions, but it's not definitely.
It's not answer. It's not answer period.
Yeah. No.
No.
Response. I've even
Res-
changed my.
response time. So okay, I know the House Leader has a fair amount of responsibility on what.
Yeah.
Who is the House?
Andrew Scheer.
Andrew Scheer is the
Yeah.
House Leader for His Majesty's Loyal Opposition,
Mhm.
and who is the House Leader for the government?
Gould. She's back now. Katrina Gould.
Katrina Gould. Okay.
It was Glenn. What the heck's his name for the Liberals? I don't. NDP is, so I can picture his glasses. Not Blaney. Anyways, they get together and they organize as far as the agenda, what's going to happen inside the House. And
Perhaps that's where I was thinking they had an
Yeah, they
idea of
more-
what direction things were going.
so they give us a weekly report. So they report back to say and then get us ready for here's the bills that are going to be debated. Who wants to speak on the bills?
Okay.
That's what the kind of the House Leader.
Those
staff
are
does.
things that it all takes time and organization.
Mhm.
Like you
Yeah.
see those questions and those responses, but you don't know where it's coming.
Oh yeah, the backstory of
The
Usually,
backstory.
if when you come to Ottawa, like I usually have some time just before question period, so there'll be here's the topics of top discussion. This is what we're really focusing on. There's a kind of a backstory, and you'll see the comments back and forth in the question period. Like you don't see it when you're watching it on the news or on CPAC, but there's lots of banter back and forth as far as really getting at a guy that's the backstory. What's the inside baseball story kind of thing, right?
In hockey, it's called chirping.
Yeah. But why are they chirping about this, right? And this is the way they're going to respond. Like you can almost, it'll be interesting to see what they say because the last 3 days he's answered it like this. Then all of a sudden they switch and they change their answers. Like all you're watching as a viewer is today's question period, right? But you don't know how 3 other times it was asked, how it was answered. So
Okay, so there's a lot goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
We all need to make a trip to Ottawa and arrange
Yes.
to sit in the gallery.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
sounds like a plan. So I know you've worked on rural connectivity.
Yep.
And
My bill got passed.
your bill got passed.
Yes.
Congratulations. That
Yeah.
is a tremendous achievement. And let's face it,
240, 230 private members' bills in the history of Canada have been passed.
people say nothing's getting done.
Yeah.
So I think
That's in the history of Canada.
that's in the history of Canada.
Yeah.
That's a lot of years.
Yeah. So it's quite an achievement. It's good, and it's good for the consumer and good for people that use internet. So
How long ago did it pass your bill?
it was the last day of Parliament. They got
So-
royal assent. They actually had a ceremony, and it was the first ceremony since COVID. So the actual
Okay.
speaker or the Governor General was in the Senate. She nodded her head, and that was it. So I stood at the bar and watched my bill being passed. So
That would be a
it was
rather
a really good, neat
emotional,
experience. It was really
emotional
good.
thing to
So
see that.
Lee flew out for it, and we had it was great. It's sort of like this when you get swearing in ceremony.
Yes.
There is a ceremony behind these bills being passed. So
Which the
Sometimes
average
they have
person wouldn't
Yeah.
know.
it's rare to be at that ceremony, especially now that the Senate and the House is split up. But there was
With the
Yeah.
renovations.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's the picture of Parliament now is with the cranes, like what we
Yeah,
have on
So that's,
behind us
center
is
block's right there now.
is-
Yeah.
Is there any movement of things getting actually done with rural connectivity? What will it take to? The bill's been passed.
So now it's in the CRTC's hands. So the bill was basically internet service providers right now can sell you a service, theoretical service, like and it works for them. So I use the analogy of going to fill up your car, wanting 50 liters of fuel, getting 10, but paying for 50. That's the kind of service they can sell you right now. They can promise the sky, but you might only get 10 liters or 10 megabytes, right? So for speed. So what my bill, legislatively, the CRTC is supposed to have some different meetings around Canada with industry and consumers to figure out how they're going to what kind of label or what kind of system that needs to be put in place that would tell the consumer, here's the kind of service you're buying and what kind of service you can expect while using the internet. So we have examples in the United States. They're looking at a food label type of labeling. So that's what the CRTC is kind of looking at. They're going to see what our Canadian industries are doing. They've done this in Australia. That's when we were passing the bill. We used Australia. They did this back in 2016. Actually, they enabled this kind of legislation, and it did benefit consumers. And it's really what it does is send a clear signal to consumers of what kind of service they're buying, so they can make a better informed decision.
Okay.
So then that lowers, that's better competition. So then, prices ultimately reduce because you know what you're paying for.
Okay, that's good to know. So the next step is having CRTC work on it, and
we actually just met with them, I think 2 weeks ago now, and just kind of what to expect, and then we'll start informing people that these workshops or the period is now to provide input and see what they're doing. So stay tuned on that one.
Stay tuned. That's always, don't hold our breath, but keep your ears open.
The biggest benefit is it's legislation, so they have to do something with it, and that was why it was so important. The government tried to pass through regulation, so then it's kind of we can kind of do it, but it's way off on the side of the table. When it's legislation, and this is what the CRTC actually commented, it was a positive thing. It gives them very clear direction to go and act. Whereas if government just says, here's the regulation and work on it when you can, it doesn't have the weight of legislation. Legislation takes a priority on action versus regulation.
Okay, because I know there's a difference between recommendation and regulation.
Yeah.
But this goes beyond that.
This is legislation, which is the highest priority.
Yeah. Well, and there is a subject that I don't want to get into debating on that CRTC is involved with, and that's the local journalism initiative, which the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition is not in favor of in supporting local journalism initiative. And as someone who's involved in journalism and in the subsidy doesn't come without a price. They work really hard to.
Nothing does with government.
Well, that's true. Nothing does with government.
And when you look at the philosophy behind, when you're reliant on a government for your business, it creates a false crutch. And that's, I think we all recognize that. And for whatever reasons, we are where we're at, right? This government has a tendency to weaponize these programs, though.
Okay.
And that is the biggest, I think, philosophical difference between the Liberal government that's sitting right now and the NDP Liberal government versus us Conservatives.
How could it not be weaponized? Is there a way?
Let you do your business. Let you have access to everything you need, all the tools you need to make money and to make your business model work. Instead of standing in the way and saying, here, you can't do business with Facebook because they don't pay enough to the government. You can't do business with online platforms because, you know what, government has to censor that. You know what? You know exactly what your readership wants. They want complete freedom. They want to have access to the truth. And there's no room for a government to be in there saying, we're going to prioritize Canadian content. We're going to prioritize, if it's hate speech, that's open to interpretation. Let's have another think tank. Meanwhile, you're cast off to the side and muzzled because you're under review. Government intervention does not work.
Okay.
Let the free market figure it out. And your customers.
And your customers. And the key is the government could be one of our biggest customers. And they do, at all levels, they do by advertising
Yeah.
airtime and space in print. But and then this is getting rather personal because we've been in the
Weeds.
print
We're
business,
getting in the weeds.
getting into the weeds. It's amazing how many organizations, when they go to do something, the first thing the committee says is, what's the government funding? They do it to themselves, and then this has gone on for 50 years. Or they send something to a local, in this case, print media, and they want their platform printed for free. And we think, yes, that's good, but
Don't print it.
believe me,
Like, why are you printing it?
no
free rides.
Some
I pay
some
for mine.
papers have. You pay for yours, yes. And there comes a point where it's news, and that's
Every one of us, and it's interesting, right? Like as a member of parliament, I have a budget to run news articles. I have a budget for that.
and you can
And
pay for them.
Never mind about the government itself.
Yeah, well, that's
And we can
we'll
pay
set
for
them
it.
aside.
If I want to, funded by the, it should say, funded by the government of Canada, and then everybody knows
Everybody has a
why
budget.
they're reading it.
Everyone.
And where it comes from, the source, right? That is responsible journalism. But they shouldn't get a free ride.
And
I don't think that's like that was.
but
never
because
the intent.
a lot of times you will see on televised things that this is sponsored by.
Yeah.
During election time is prime, because
Well,
it
because
has
then all of
to
a sudden
be,
it's not the government, it's the
It's-
Conservative Party of Canada
or a liberal
local riding-
candidate, or
local riding association, right?
Yep.
So it's always on the bottom of the signs and all that stuff.
Yep.
That's labeled, has to
And-
be labeled on there.
Yep.
So it's not the government of Canada. That's when elections different than, but that's all advertising too, and that's all local. So
now there's where we'll see what all's in this can of worms that I'm going to open up. Get the can opener out.
see, when it's been a year since you last interviewed me.
Right now we're on the cusp of a rather divisive election south of the 49th parallel.
Okay.
And it's hard to avoid, it's hard to get some people to not watch some
Well,
of their channels.
Yeah.
You get fed that.
through our
So-
through our state our news reporting, most of the news is around the U.S. government. Nothing about our Canadian government,
Well,
which is disgusting.
but never mind what happens to our own media, but I'm just talking about it's
Well-
very easy to watch the
Well, sure.
media like CNN and things like that.
Yeah.
People don't always, I get the sense that people don't understand how different we are actually in how we operate our politics in Canada. They will compare Republicans to Conservatives, Democrats to
Yes.
to Liberals.
Yeah.
And I could talk about it, but that's coming from someone who's tertiary. Like I'm not primary. I'm not the one who's had to go around and raise funds to run a campaign. How are we different from the US? Like it's so visceral and so
Well, that you look at so U.S. is like what 10 times bigger than Canada
Okay.
as far as population, right? They only have a two-party system. We have a multi-party system. There is Canadians historically have always been of center. Everybody fights over the center in Canada, and no matter what party you are, people like center. The Canadians are normally like, okay, we'll take a little bit of left, we'll take a little bit of right. We like the center. Things are
we apologize for everything.
yes.
E-
But as far as the systems, as how much they vote for their president, we vote for the local candidate. So that's one of the biggest differences. The media and this government has always, anytime they've found a candidate like Donald Trump has not helped, as far as elected politicians, and like he's a very very, I don't want to say flamboyant, divisive. You pick any kind of word you want.
Bombastic.
Yeah, like I mean, but that's his style, right? Meanwhile, he has the policies of the Republican Party behind him, and that is something to remember, right? So and they're usually fiscally responsible, more free trade than actually what the Democrats are. We've never seen like this protectionist government that's right now in the United States is probably we've never seen it like since the 80s as far as the protectionism that's going on right now by this Democratic government, Biden and his administration. So they are differently. Their fundraising and the way they what they use their money, how they get money, that feeds their, like corporations can go like and fund their whole systems, right? Like they talk at $1 billion for Carmilla. We are in Canada here, it has to be an individual, it can't be a corporation, and the most you can give is $1,750 to a campaign. So, and then during election year, you can give, but you only get the first tax credits for the first $1,750. So it's really where the money is very much more tracked in Canada, and it's a lot less influential. So then it does actually get down to the votes. In Canada, it's much more realistic. It's much more transparent as far as how our voting system works. They hire 1,000 people in this riding to put on an election. 1,000 people.
What do they do?
Everything from scrutineer, anything from Elections Canada people.
Oh, 1,000. Well, no.
That's everything from the returning officer to their office to out to the different polls.
Is that because we're such a large geographic?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's.
Yeah. But you think about it, and they have to report into a system, right? That it goes into. So all that has to work.
But those are independent. The electoral system is not tied to a political party.
Correct.
Whereas in the U.S., is it?
I don't know.
You don't know.
You're
focused on what.
Our democracy is vastly different, and it's sound. I have no qualms with. One thing is really I find extremely a lot of people don't realize, and it's extremely helpful. We can send scrutineers to every polling if we want. If you want to help out an election, send a scrutineer and have someone looking at the polls and when they're getting counted, right? We can do that in Canada still. A lot of people don't realize it. Like if you want to be part of a democracy and see how this works, volunteer the next election. Say, yeah, I'll go and I'll witness the ballots being counted for you. That's all volunteer work. You know what? And thank you to all the volunteers that make elections happen in Canada, because there's a massive amount. It doesn't matter what team you are. The teams behind you that make the election happen at the end of a day is just amazing. Amazing what happens.
Well, I know, especially for by-elections, they'll go a long way to campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a riding that or an electoral district that their connection is purely political. They probably know the candidate as well, because it all intertwines.
Well, yeah, and as an incumbent, you can go and you can help anybody. Like, I mean, I helped out with the by-election in Winnipeg this last summer. I guess that was the other thing I did this summer. You were asking what I did. I knew my days went somewhere, and there was about a week and a half I went to door knocking and helping out in Elmo Transcona.
In Elmo Transcona.
That's where my extra week went to. So.
No, it's kind of fascinating because people will try and compare, and there is no comparison.
They're like, we don't. It happens to be our whoever the leader of the party is our prime minister. Like there's so many different things, and yet we try to sell our leaders. Like it's interesting how people vote. Like some people vote for the Conservative Party because it's conservative. Some people vote for the leader. Some people vote for the candidate. Right? Like I mean, everybody's different, and that's what makes our democracy work so good. Like it's
there's a more wide base.
Yeah.
For people to
and a lot more transparent too.
A lot more transparent.
Yeah.
Well, I know you have to report in what you've spent and things like that.
Yeah.
You touched on Republicans versus Democrats and free trade. That's something that is being talked about because the election is getting to be days away now down in the U.S. And what's it going to do to Canada's next round of free trade agreement talks, or any idea? Like, do you
want
dare
a business person in there that wants free trade, or do you want a protectionist government in that doesn't? And I know Trump has said he's going to open up the XL pipeline and get Canadian oil and gas down to the Gulf Coast where they can start making refineries. So, I mean, if he gets that completed, that's a big win for Canada. But maybe the environmentalists have a different viewpoint on that. So you really do have to look at the policies of it. I don't know. I guess I go back to Trump's. Maybe he's the messenger. Maybe he's a little bit rough around the edges. But the policies for Republicans bode well. I don't think and U.S. is going to look after U.S. as well. Canada should look after Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have a government right now that is basically will cave into anybody. They're looking for any kind of friends. And any type of government that would already not, here we'll play nice with the U.S. and we want this and stand on one thing, but meanwhile not support NATO, not support our troops, not keep our borders safe.
Yeah.
And, the U.S. and our NATO partners have a very good, valid reason to say, come on, Canada, let's get on with this. And as well as our other partners. Like, he's not wrong in calling some of our countries out that we got to, pull our socks up and start. The world is a different place than it was. It started with Ukraine. Of course, now we've got Israel and the Middle East flaring back up, and we got issues in Taiwan. We are entering into a more volatile world, like back to the Cold War era. Mm-hmm. I think, in our opinion, just from what I've seen going on. And I think when the wall came down, I think we got the world got lulled into this, the Cold War was over. And we built kind of a collective sigh of relief as world, democracies and that. But, China, Russia, and Iran never gave up. They kept on warring and fighting and building their munitions. So there's things we have to tend to as a country if we want to maintain our sovereignty.
Be aware of and deal with.
Yeah.
And this is about Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa, which isn't going to be Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa when the election gets called.
Yeah, it's going to be Riding Mountain.
Which a certain member of the legislature in Manitoba is not impressed with, because we now have a provincial electoral district that's Riding Mountain and a federal one.
Yeah, there's five provincial districts in this riding.
Mm-hmm.
And so, interesting enough, Ontario, they're all named after federal ridings.
Okay, that's an interesting
so
point, because
we've
had in this electoral district, we've had many different names.
Yeah.
And we've dropped the Marquette part of it, which goes back historically a long ways. And of course, Neepawa could feel really good because now Neepawa was on there, but they won't be anymore.
Yeah.
Will the boundaries change much?
Yes, we're gaining one municipality. Treeherne.
Okay,
is
so
going to be
south.
down. Yeah, one more south of Carberry. That one municipality.
Glenborough in there now?
No.
Treeherne. Just haven't been down number 2 highway lately.
Yeah.
have to think about
and
that.
it goes over to, I think we pick up Long Plain, and half of, but we lose, actually Elton is where I live. I think we're losing Douglas and the half of the CFB Shiloh.
Okay.
So we used to have, it went right down Main Street and we got the base,
Mm-hmm.
and now we lose the base and we don't have the
And you
town
can't
right
go campaign there anyway.
Right. Well, you
That-
can. Actually, you can.
Okay.
Yes, we're supposed to, actually. And I've talked to the base, the guys that are on the barracks and that. We have full access to them if we want
Okay.
to.
Perhaps it was memberships or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, during the nomination. I believe
We can
that makes sense.
remember that
Yeah.
from some history in our household. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so you lose a little at the south end and gain some more mile. Well, it's at the south. It's still in the south end.
Yeah, and we kept. They tried to bring in. They cut the Swan River Valley in half, but they didn't like it too much. So the RMs wrote letters saying, "No, please leave us with this riding." So they did. So worked out good. And actually, there's a really good book written. It's the People of Riding Mountain. Actually, Leach Printing had it, so it was Walter Scott was the main author of it. He lived in Rapid City. He knew my mother-in-law very well. I got a signed copy of it.
Oh, okay.
But it tells a history. They came to Parliament back in 1990, and there was a committee about how they were begging with the federal government at that time to listen to the locals and work with the locals to form back to the partnership. He told a story in there. He tells a story of how everybody got along before the park came along, and it is fascinating. It's fascinating, and we're seeing this all happen again. And it's it's about government not listening and not being responsible to the people that are on the landscape. And I've got to get a hold of it. I guess his daughter's still living. Yeah, I believe
what
one of the small
year
towns.
would that be? That was
2098, somewhere in there. It was. I have the book. It's actually sitting in Friends Riding Mountain, copy of it, and I've got a copy at home.
Because
signed copy.
And it's not every member of Parliament has the opportunity to have a national park
because it's
in the center of their.
Well, and the people of Riding Mountain, it was named Riding Mountain because of the Riding Mountain area. Like there was a history behind that name, and it was Kesey, Rolling River. Like they named the First Nations are still there, but it was the government from Ottawa that basically messed everything up. So, and we've got some real issues with Parks Canada right across this country. So.
We had our household had an opportunity to speak with one family that had to leave Jasper. Our daughter-in-law's nephew and his family.
Okay.
And they're looking into it. That's a major part of that committee that you're involved with.
We're just in the middle of that study right now. We got 2 more meetings next week when we go back.
So there's a lot of detail there.
Yeah. Basically, the government, what we're finding out through the forest pine beetle came in, infestation came in. There was a point in time, so foresters come in and they were starting to study this, right? Like people that are on the landscape, forest managers. And they said, okay, this is one fellow that he gave testimony on it. He laid out the roadmap of how to react to this. So we could have baited the pine beetle into an area, sprayed it out. That was one, and then take out the deadfall, and it would have contained them. If you didn't do that in year 1, year 2, this is what you had to do. And if you didn't do that in year 2, year 3, you have to start getting, because the forest is going to be dead. This is how many acres are going to be gone. But you got to start removing deadfall because Jasper and in towns, people are going to start getting impacted, the infrastructure, right? That was 16, 17. It was 17 he laid out this whole thing. Catherine McKenna was the environment minister at the time, and it basically fell on deaf ears and basically like said, don't worry about it. You guys don't know anything. We have science, and it was Parks Canada controlled. So Parks Canada got on their high horse and said, no, we got this under control. Thanks for your input, but don't worry about it. In comes, we have Minister Guilbeault. Of course, then we come out through access to information. We found that the parks officials were starting to talk about preventing or stopping prescribed burns. And prescribed burns, clear forestry, removing the deadfall is a tool that you use to reduce the fire load inside of an area, right? And so forest management.
It also
They were talking about because
reintroducing, like it also renovates, like
yes, rejuvenates. Yeah,
rejuvenate. That's the word.
So it's a natural source of kind of like nature does it this way naturally, right? So, but there was a email chain that we got through Access of Information that they were through basically it was political. They had to consider the political implications as well as like we might have to stop because of political implications. We might have to stop prescribed burns, and it was like sort of like that. Like so, and this is coming from park staff that should have no influence on the political lens of that because of media all of a sudden paying attention to this and all that, right? So that was the start of the whole conversation about what do you mean Parks Canada knew they had a trouble, but they weren't going to help save Jasper or the forest because of political implications, and that kind of started the whole investigation into what we were kind of looking into. And the only reason they got triggered is because the government put through a bill that gave Jasper like their own autonomy as far as when they became a city to on their own. So Parks Canada said, no, we're not going to manage Jasper anymore. We're going to give it over to the municipality. So that there was a bill that went through and it got through UC, and they said, oh, but to pass this, it has to come through the Environment Committee. And then when they came to the Environment Committee, this all got exposed. So then we got 2 more meetings, and we're going to get more exposure. They turned away 20 fire trucks and 50 firefighters, and that they were going in to protect assets for insurance, and they could have. And then when they got into Jasper, they found out that the Jasper uses the national park uses different fittings than anybody else in the province of Alberta. So all these things just fell into place, like if you weren't part of the code and part of the group. So there's lots of finger pointing going on. But the bottom line is this government, Parks Canada, did not listen to the people that were on the ground and knew better, and knew the managers knew it. It's just like not listening to the farmers, not listening to the people that are in this riding, about the people that are living there, right?
Some of this predates any particular government, possibly too, when it comes to Parks Canada, because they are.
This all started. The pine beetle came in, and the infestation started 16, 17.
Okay.
This is the ironic thing about it. It was like Trudeau got elected in, and all of a sudden the pine beetle started to go. And that was the years. It was just key to get it under control. But they knew if they didn't get it under control, year 1, year 2, they needed to do this, and they would have been fixed, and they would have sold the lumber, and they would have. Like there's so many other things that could have been done and not cost $1 billion in damages, and having 2,000 people homeless.
Traveling across the country to go be with family, with their children and cat and dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
it's terrible. And if I was,
they had a good attitude. They were thankful for that they were all alive, and
it does beg the question though. Like there is, we have issues right across Canada with forest management within Parks Canada, and this is all under Parks Canada's operations side of it. And we do have a national park right in the middle of the riding, and I don't know if the locals know what the forest management practices are like. How are we doing? How much dead falls there? How much fuel loads there? I don't know. And but we better find out. So,
talking about pine beetles, do we dare talk about zebra mussels?
Sure.
Was there a way to stop them, or was it just inevitable and you control them? Do you maybe former MP Sopak could tell us better, because that was his kind of area of.
I think I take more of I guess the reality or the farmer in me is, you know what, Mother Nature bats last. Mother Nature brought in an invasive species, however they came in, they're there. Mm-hmm. What is the most effective way to deal with it? Do we just learn how to live with them, or do we try to eradicate them? Anything that I've seen, and they'll swear up and down that eradication works. It doesn't. It's never been proven that eradication works. The reasoning for shutting, what I really didn't like is some people got to operate on the lake, some people don't. That doesn't make any sense for conservation. The Sparrow decision was very clear. If you're going to do something in the name of conservation, you have every right to shut that lake down. And why that was allowed, and then you can't be allowed, and then so we have another business kind of really directly impacted. I don't think that's fair at all. It's not right to.
Well, in some of those things, some of those water vehicles isn't the right word. Some of them never leave the lake.
That's right. So I was advocating for, let's just do the same as we did last year. Keep on with your testing, and let it be. If you didn't leave the lake, there's no harm, right?
No.
But I mean, they even stopped the Martiste that doesn't leave the lake and let them park there. But if they're in the boat, like, what's that solving, right? Like, I mean, do they treat the boat then? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And on top of it, the transparency. They kept on saying, well, you got to believe the science, and we got to do something to protect the lake. It's like we got to do something, but is that, like, what is that science? And we've asked numerous times, is the water conducive to zebra mussels, like, versus Lake Winnipeg? Is there different things? What's that water look like? They're scaring everybody by the Clear Lake goes into a creek that eventually ends up in the Little Saskatchewan watershed, right? Like down the river.
Yeah.
But they don't know any, like, if you were going to stop zebra mussels and treat and do anything on that, just start there. Like, that is, like, protect yourself right there. It's just a little creek. It's nothing. It barely flows at any given time. Why not look at that versus trying to shut down a whole lake and it impacted. They say, like, and parks will gloss over it, and our visitation's up, and don't worry, like, it's just the businesses complaining. That is nothing more than it's so hypocritical, and it's the businesses around that supplied those boats and looked after the services of the boats got hit hard, very hard.
Okay, and those are things that we're getting into policy and politics and what environmentalists and it's hard to avoid talking about that when it has impacted a community.
Yeah.
Jasper was a tragedy.
Yeah. They all have a common link, though. Parks Canada and environment.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And that is it's the mismanagement of that department, which lies at the feet of the environment minister, Minister Guilbeault.
Yeah.
And we all know what he loves, the carbon tax, and he loves all his policies. Like, they're just that out of touch. And that is the honest truth.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, so.
And, like, we weren't supposed to go campaigning today, but that is dealing with something that people in rural Manitoba probably see differently than someone who lives in a large city that has big factories and big smoke.
Well, why should they have any say on what happens on our landscape?
But we're a nation, and what happens,
It doesn't fix the problem. Like, you can announce all you want, right? We're going to fix this. We're going to, fix the forest. But we spend all the money we want. We'll spend all your taxpayers' dollars, but nothing accomplished.
Yeah. So, our technician in the sound booth
So you get frantic.
is letting us know that our time to have a chat
You made
is
it,
over.
Chris.
My boss, not Waddell, but the other one, may not let me interview again, but I really appreciate you
Thank you
taking
very
time.
much, Chris.
It
Yeah.
was really good.
I enjoyed this.
So that is our visit, our talk, and a roundup with what's been happening in Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa, soon to be Riding Mountain electoral district, and have a good day, and weekend's coming up, and we've had a tremendous October.
Yes, yes, it has.
We
It's
have.
already the
So
15th.
Thank you for tuning in to Coffee Chat.